So then, in terms of working with the shadow, an obvious question, I suppose, is if the shadow is that which we're not, by its nature, not conscious of, how do we begin to work with it? Because obviously we don't want to be ruled by that. We don't want that to be what's shaping our behavior and dictating our relationship to life. So how do we know when the shadow is arising? How in your work on this do you try to get a handle on it and help people start to address these issues?
Yeah, and let me say that I think for most of us, this Jungian concept and the work in psychology in general around shadow or around the kind of appearance or manifestation of what's me, but that can't be held as me, so it comes out in the world. It's a fairly common observation, and most of us who've dealt with psychology at all, the idea of shadow is not necessarily new, but really learning how to work with shadow individually, how to work with it when you see it coming up with your friends, how it arises in your family, and most particularly how it comes out in our spiritual communities, because it gets more and more challenging in a certain way to work with shadow, depending on whether you're working with it by yourself, in relationship, in a collective of people that you're working with in a, let's say, work context, or people that you're striving with in relationship to spiritual practice. So we have all those dimensions. But just to kind of do a simple looking at shadow work generally, the point that you made is the important one, is that it's shadow precisely because you don't see it. And one of the things that I'm always really struck by is how, and one of the keys, I think, to learning to work with shadow is it's very paradoxical how blind we are to certain aspects of ourselves, and yet how clearly everyone else sees them. So whenever I do a shadow work seminar and a particular person is working on shadow, everyone in the room has arrived at where the shadow is for the person long before they can see it. And, in fact, are usually very enthusiastic to tell the person what it is they see. And so,
imagine that.
Yeah, just imagine that. It's just, it's kind of interesting that we can look around and say, well, of course, this person has, a tremendous sense of confidence, but when it comes to, powerlessness, it's very disowned. We use that expression, disowned, right? Or this person sees himself as very helping, but actually doesn't really see the way they oppress other people, that's very disowned, that they're helping as a form of oppression. And we can see this so clearly in other people, but we ourselves are blind to it, and that's one of the important points. And so we have to start being curious about what the clues to identifying our own shadow are. How do we actually see the manifestation of our particular shadow in the world?